Welcome to the Knock Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Checkmate Coffman. Welcome back, Rabbi. How are you today, sir?
Always a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it is. It is. Of course it is. Yes, it is. Okay.
There's no question, and do a great job.
Right.
So it's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so our title I had to shorten because it was like a paragraph long. So
we're good at that.
We are. So why does the Torah say that the descendants of Ishmael will be like wild donkeys? And what was the rest of that title that you sent in? What was it called? What was the rest
it says
of it?
When the nations are going to be mixed together in the future.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, and that's where we're headed, guys. So, Rabbi Coffman, take it away.
All right. Always a pleasure, as we said. Always a pleasure to be here. The Torah, book of Genesis, chapter 16, speaks about Hagar and Ishmael, and God promises he's going to have a child, right? And that Sarah, or Sarai at this point, gives Hagar, her maidservant, to Avram. She gets pregnant, and he's named Ishmael. And the Torah says that, verse 11, chapter 16, verse 11, that angel of Hashem says to her, "Behold, you will conceive, you'll give birth to a son, you're going to name him Ishmael, for Hashem has heard your prayer," right? Yishma means to hear, and Kale at the end of the word means God. God's going to hear your prayer. And what's he going to be? What's he going to be like? Verse 12, chapter 16, verse 12, book of Genesis, he shall be a wild ass of a man, his hand against everyone's hand against him, and over all his brothers he shall dwell. Right? So we have a command, or we have a statement, let's say better. We have a statement by an angel of God. Angel of God says, this is who Ishmael is going to be. Now, the question is, and we could ask this almost about anything, but why we're going to ask it, specifically over here, and that is, well, the Torah makes a statement. The Torah makes seemingly a backhand, slap upside the head statement over here of who Ishmael is going to be, right? So that's controversial enough. People in the Muslims say, the Torah makes him look bad, right? It's secondary to Yitzchak, and the Torah says, look who he's going to be, look what he's going to be like, etc. So really, we'll answer a question with another question and, get back to the answer. But it's true that the Torah could say anything, right? The Torah could say, we read in last week's parsha, we're not allowed to eat certain animals, right? You're not allowed, you have to eat an animal that chews its cuts, right? And that's split hooves. And if it has one or the other, doesn't have both character traits, can't eat from it. So that means pig is out, right? Pig is, has one of the character traits, doesn't have the other, right? Camel, rabbits, there are other things that are singled out, that have one character trait, and not another character trait, which kind of interesting. That would make Moshe Rabbeinu Dr. Doolittle, because how in the world would he know, that certain animals only have one character trait, not the other, and it wouldn't be kosher, right? If you only lived in a certain area, so, maybe one possible proof, actually God spoke to him, because there's no possible way he's going to get that information, right? But we could say, so why does the Torah say I can't eat these things? So you could say, one possible answer is because, first of all, Jews do not eat animals that are carnivores, right? That are predators, in general. And there's a divine command. It's a divine command. So 80% of the Torah doesn't make rational sense, as we mentioned many times. And that being the case, you're going to say, okay, we have to try and figure out answers. We have to try and understand why the Torah says what it says. So we can say that about shatnez, not allowed to mix wool and linen, right? If a person has a sweater or a suit that's made, and it says 100% made, it's got 100% wool, you have to get it checked to make sure there's no linen. Why? It's a decree, right? It's a divine decree. So obviously this applies to Jews. So when it comes to certain things or many things, a lot of it's a decree. It's a divine decree. Some things make more sense, some things less sense, but probably more than 80% of the Torah, as we mentioned many times, doesn't make sense. Now, let's get back. Now, people are going to say, oh, he's ducking the question. Well, let's see. So when the Torah makes a statement, and the Torah says that this person did X, or this person has this character trait, what does that mean? It means it's inherent in their nature. It means that's what their nature is. Can they fight it? Can they go against it? Yes. Is it possible? Is it possible they have a tremendous bias, a tremendous disposition, or maybe indisposition, whatever you want to call it, to certain things? We all have certain character traits that we're wired. That, some are more stingy, some are less stingy, some get angry more or less, whatever. We're wired a certain way based on the source of our soul and what we have to work on. So it's part of our psyche. Other things we do to ourselves. We make it part of us, which also not very good. But we can't say, well, it's God's fault. God made me this way. We did it to ourselves, right? There are many things we've done to ourselves, and that would transgress Coffman's 614th commandment of don't be stupid. Why? Because the Ramban, I think it's the Ramban in the book of Job says, when Job's friends are chastising him about his bad misfortune and everything going on, they said, well, maybe, the Ramban explains, maybe, the constellations were the way they are, and this is why it happened, and you're not in control, right? But the Ramban says we could do things that we blame God for, right? We blame God and we say, why'd you do this? Why'd this happen? And God's going to say, I didn't stop you. I didn't tell you to do this, right? So the Gemara says, if a person wants to go in the right direction, God will help him. If he wants to go in the wrong direction, God will not stop them. So you did that. I didn't do it, right? God's going to say, I didn't do anything wrong, right? If I didn't do anything wrong, what are you complaining, right? What are you complaining about? You did it to yourself. So if we do it to ourselves, we can understand. But if we're given certain character traits that really we're not in control, we have them, they're dormant or not even, they could come out to fruition in many different ways. Person can say, what do you want from me? This is the way I was created. This is part of my nature. Now, even if that's true, we mentioned many times in the past, even if that's true, does God want me to act on it? No. He has no intention whatsoever I should act on it. But I have a certain disposition, right? I have a certain gene, right? Some people would say, someone who's homosexual, they'll say they have a certain homosexual gene, right? So, that's what's causing them to do that. Well, I got a lot of bad genes, right? I got an anger gene, a miserly gene, you fill in the blank, a lazy gene. We could blame it on on our genes that, well, that's the way I'm made. Now, let's say that's true. Let's say that's true. And we have a certain disposition, right? We have a certain disposition to certain things. Now, even if that's true and I act on it, am I liable? Of course I'm liable. The fact that I have a certain disposition, God says, I'm not interested, you should act on it. I don't want you to act on it, but okay, you have a more of an affinity to certain things than maybe someone else. Fine. So a person acts, has an affinity towards that. Someone else, let's say, has more an affinity to anger, right? To rip things to shreds, I don't know, punch walls. I don't know, a person can have an affinity to different things. But God says, I don't want you to do it. I don't want you to act on it. But a person can say, what do you want? You made me this way. Fine. But even if we're wired a certain way, doesn't mean I have to do it. We're not forced into it. It's once something becomes part of our psyche, it's much harder to do, right? It's much harder to get over. And let's say a person does something to themselves. Let's say a person smokes. Nicotine, is addictive. So therefore makes it that much harder to fight against anything we make part of our nature, right? A person does something wrong and they do it wrong again. They do it wrong a third time, a fourth time. It becomes part of your nature. Becomes second nature over here. Becomes that much more difficult to fight against. Doesn't mean it's impossible. No. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just you have a certain affinity, a certain disposition. Either whether God gave it to you or you did it to yourself makes it that much harder to fight. But make no mistake, we're all wired in different ways. Each person is unique, in their own way. We have certain characteristics that may be the same, maybe they're different, but each person's wired, pretty much in a different way. Now, if God says And this is an angel of God. An angel of God comes along and says in the Torah, this is what the descendants of Ishmael are going to be like. This is what Ishmael is going to be like. Now, what does that mean? It means it's going to apply to him and it's going to apply to his descendants, which means that these people are given, certain character traits, just like Esav, right? One of the reasons Esav, the Talmud says, God goes to all the nations asking if they want the Torah, right? And they all ask what's written in it. So it's in Avodah Zarah 2b to 3a. They go to Esav, who's Edom, and they ask Esav, you want to know, you want the Torah? What does Esav say? What's written in it? It says you're not allowed to kill, right? It says don't murder. Esav says, what are you talking about? Doesn't it say in the Torah, I'm going to live by the sword? Now I'm not interested. So now, then the Torah goes to Ishmael and says, you want to know what's written in the Torah? Ishmael says what's written in the Torah, says don't steal. Says, what do you mean don't steal? It's part of my nature. That's this verse over here, right? My hand is in the hand of everyone. Everyone's hand's against me, right? His hand is against everyone. Everyone's hand's against him. So he says, no, I'm not interested. Now, before we get to Ishmael, we could ask about Esav, right? Esav says, I'm a murderer, right? That's what I do. I live by the sword. So if that's true, and Esav, the offspring of Esav, when God says this is their character trait, it doesn't just mean them. It means that goes through, all their generations. So therefore, they're more prone to murder. Now, if they murder someone, not in self-defense, they murder in cold blood. So what could their claim be? After 120 years, God's going to say, don't you know? No, I'd lodge, not allowed to murder. But didn't you say in the Torah, I'm going to live by the sword? Live by the sword, die by the sword. That's my nature. God says, well, who do you think put it in your nature? So I put it in your nature. I didn't tell you to act on it. But I have a certain disposition. So what? What do I get? You have a certain disposition. The fact that you have a certain disposition just means that that's going to be a harder thing for you to overcome. But it doesn't mean you can't overcome it, right? You're just given a certain disposition. So we say the same thing over here. The angel says, this is what the descendants of Ishmael are going to be. This is what he's going to be. He's going to be a wild ass of a person. We'll keep this PG, right? He's going to be a wild ass of a person. And his hand's going to go against everyone. Everyone's hand's going to go against him. And over all his brothers shall he dwell. Right? So someone's going to say, as the Muslims say, on a regular basis, we're making them look bad. First of all, you see that Isaac's picked over Ishmael, right? Makes him look bad. But this makes him look worse. He's going to say it's an absolute wild man. Not only is he a wild man, he's a thief. His hand is in the hand of everyone. What does that mean in the vernacular? He's a thief, right? That's what he does. That's part of his nature. Now, I will say, and people can call me a racist. They can say what they want here in Israel. If something gets stolen in a neighborhood, most of the time, it's done by an Arab. Cars, for sure, right? By the time car's stolen, it's probably in some chop block somewhere, being taken apart. In the Arab territories, whatever the case is. But you're going to say, oh, that's a racist thing to say. So statistics prove that. Statistics here definitely prove that. Now, does that mean every Arab, every Muslim's going to do that? No. Doesn't mean that. Can they overcome it? They can overcome it. But inherently in their nature, when the Torah says as well, or the Talmud says, what are 3 character traits of Jews? 3 character traits are they're Rachmanim, Bashanim, and Gemilus Chasadim. They're Rachmanim, they have compassion for others. They're Bashanim, they get embarrassed easily. And the third thing is Gemilus Chasadim, they do acts of loving kindness. Anyone that's ever been in a Jewish community know that there are all kinds of free loan societies. They loan all kinds of things in every religious community. Lawnmowers, medicine, people get faxes. I don't know if people still get faxes today. All kinds of things where they'll loan things out, for free. Obviously you'd have to replenish it, bring it back, whatever the case is. But they do an unbelievable amount of chesed. You can't even imagine. A person forgot to buy challahs for Shabbos. Someone's got a challah gemach, right? Give me with chesed. They have extra challahs, wine, all kinds of things. My daughter got married, So there are places they have these suitcases, not big suitcases, but they have all kinds of things. They have they have the candle holders, that the parents bring the bride and the groom down. They have the candles, they have matches, they have they have Band-Aids, they have all kinds of things. A cup to break. The groom breaks the cup. In the ceremony. They have a Kiddush cup. They have wine in there. I mean, they have all kinds of things. Right now, so they lend it out for free. You give it back to them, they replenish it, etc., or whatever the case is. A tremendous thing, So Jews and non-Jews, have certain character traits that God says this is what they represent. This is who they are. Now, could it be that even if a Jew has that character trait of doing chesed, doing acts of loving kindness, could he be a miser? Could be a miser. Maybe he doesn't want to help people. Maybe he doesn't want to give charity. We know, or if you don't know, you find out now, Jews exponentially give more money to charity than any other group. Any other group, the UJA, the UJC, the United Jewish Appeal, United Jewish Committee, I think it's called, that they raise, close to $500 million a year. I'd like to say the money's going to good causes. We're not going to go down that path, but they raise a tremendous amount of money. And, there are Orthodox Jews give tremendous amounts of money, to yeshivas, to girls' schools, so, all kinds of needy causes. So that's a character trait of someone's a Jew. Now, does that mean a person is going to act that way? No. Do they have more of an affinity, of a disposition to act this way? Yeah. Why is that? Because God made them that way. God wired their soul that way. But someone's going to say, and the Torah here says, but it makes them look bad. Right? We'll get to the second part of the question in a second. But how can you say all the descendants of Ishmael, this is going to be their character trait? Right? So this is how they're wired. This is how Jews are wired. This is how Edom, Esav, is wired. This is what the Torah tells me. Now, you could ask the question and say, why is Esav wired that way and Ishmael is wired this way? And why Jews, wired a different way? So what's the answer? Nobody knows, right? If I knew that, I'd be world famous. I wouldn't be blowing up your system every time, right? So the question is, God knows what he's doing, obviously, and he orchestrates things however he does, but he knows the essence of every person, of every soul, and for whatever reason, he puts this as part of their psyche. Now, again, even if a person is given certain character traits, does not mean he has to act on them. What it means is he has a certain affinity, right? He has a certain disposition. But when you look at the second part of the question, even if that's true, that God sees fit to give whatever character traits he does, to different nations and all that, but there's another question this person asked, and that is, if all the nations get mixed together, Sanchev came up and messed up all the nations, so then why is that the case? Why do the descendants of Ishmael and anybody else who messed up all the nations, why does Esav have his character traits? Why does Ishmael have his character traits? Why do other nations have their character traits? Nobody knows who these nations are anymore. They all got messed up. But we know that Edom, in the war of Gog and Magog, the final war that's going to be before the Messiah comes, we know that the Malbim, one of the great commentaries more than 100 years ago, in Zechariah chapter 14, says the war is going to be Edom against Ishmael. Now, Ishmael, we understand. Who is Ishmael? It means the Muslims, right? It's all his descendants. And we're gonna speak how they're all mixed up. How do we know that they're descendants? We'll get there, right? In Edom, who does Edom? Who is Esav? Who does he represent? He represents the Western world. Western world, North America, South America, right? Europe, Australia. We'll throw in Australia as well, right? So you got the Western world. You got the Western world against the Muslims, against Ishmael. Now, if all the nations are messed up, so we don't know who's who, but the Muslims claim that they have this great pedigree that they can prove they go all the way back to Ishmael. Now, the problem is, if everyone's been messed up, we don't know, these nations don't know who they are. They may say, we go all the way back, we go all the way back to Ishmael, but it's not true, right? They don't have any, they may have their own proofs, whatever their proofs are, which really doesn't matter. But if they're all messed up anyway, and all the nations get messed up, well, guess what? Then they can't prove anything. So the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Berliner, that known as the Netziv, he took over the yeshiva in Volozhin after Rav Chaim of Volozhin, right, the famous student of the Vilna Gaon. And the Netziv on this verse says, and we're going to bring this point home, that he says that Muslims, the offspring of Ishmael, will never fight one against the other. They're known for tremendous chesed because he came from Abraham, right? So we know that any offspring of Ishmael, they're tremendous when it comes to hachnasas orchim, having guests, right? Anyone's ever been, by Muslims or other in a Muslim country, this is what happens, right? Clear as day. This is what they do. This is part of their, it's part of their psyche as well. But comes along the Netziv, and the Netziv says an amazing thing. The Netziv says you're never going to have the offspring of Ishmael fight against each other. Now, what's the obvious question? The obvious question is we see that's not true. Because if they're the real descendants, if the Muslims are real descendants of Ishmael, then you see the Sunnis fight against the Shiites, right? And you see, the Taliban against these, and, everyone claiming to be part of the same group. If they're all part of the same group, how are they fighting each other? Why would they fight each other, right? So what would be the simple answer? Simple answer is the second part of the question. If the nations are going to get mixed together in the future, then that answers the question. Why? Because if they get mixed together, we don't know who's who. Even if they claim they go all the way back to Ishmael, even if they claim they have that pedigree, what do I care? It doesn't matter what they claim over here, right? That's not going to matter. What's going to matter is we don't know who's who. If we don't know who's who, then what the Netziv says is true only if they don't get mixed up. If the Muslims themselves, or the Arabs, or whoever they are, wherever the offspring of Ishmael are, if they get mixed up, if they don't get mixed up, then what's going to be? According to what the Netziv says, they'll never fight one against the other. It'll never happen. It's not part of their nature, right? It's not part of their psyche to fight their own people. Now, you can tell me, we said before, even if God makes that part of their psyche, and that's who they are, and that's what they represent, and it's all part of them, well, guess what? They may fight against, their neighbors, right? They may go against part of this nature. That could be. That very well could be. But if they're not really true descendants of Ishmael, that makes a lot more sense. Because then you don't know who the pedigree is. You don't know how far it goes. So if it doesn't go that far, what would I say? Then they could fight each other. Because then we don't know who each other is. And if we don't know who they are, and they can't prove their pedigree, so all things being equal, then that could happen. But if I don't say the second part of this question, when the nation's going to be mixed together in the future, then what the Netziv says doesn't make any sense. It should never happen. Because if what he says is true, and that the Muslims stick together, right, the offspring of Ishmael stick together, they have all kinds of tea parties, they get together, they have a lot of camaraderie, a tremendous amount of hachnasas orchim, having guests, all this, that's beautiful. Then, we'll all be playing the guitar, we'll be singing Kumbaya, everything, everything's great, but we don't see that, right? That is definitely not the case today. So now, you have to come to a few different conclusions. Either you have to say that we said before, that the descendants are not really the descendants, they're all mixed up, and they can't prove lineage, even if they claim they could, right? So that would answer up and say, well, the whole lineage is mixed up, we don't know who's who, so they can fight against each other. But if you're going to tell me they go straight back, and that's not the case, and they know who each other is, and they can say where the pedigree comes from, okay, that's a different issue. Then you knock the Netziv out. You see, well, that's not true. Today that's not true. So then you have to ask the question. You have to ask the question: what happened? How did things change? How did things go awry over here? Doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't make sense. So that's a different part. That's a different part of the issue. But the main, I just want to answer the second part of that question because, if they have this psyche and this is who they are, and that's part of their DNA, then if they're mixed up, shouldn't that DNA get messed up? And they shouldn't have that. It shouldn't be part of them, right? Or you tell me that even if the nations get mixed up, I can answer the DNA still sticks. It's there. Maybe it's dormant, but it's there. It's still part of their psyche. Maybe it's not as strong. Could be. It may not be, but it's there. It doesn't, it doesn't disappear, throughout the generations. Whether it gets weaker or not, it's a different issue. But it certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't disappear. So we could answer that way. So back to the original question, and that is, so why does the Torah say that? So we could ask that about anything, right? Not really such a fair question, because we could ask, the Torah says at the beginning of Genesis, it goes through creation. How many days did it take God to create the world? 6, right? He rested on the 7th day. Couldn't have God created the world in 2 days? Could have created in 1 day. If God can do anything, he can do it in half a day, in a couple hours, right? So why did God do that? Didn't do that. Obviously, there's something, each day had its own thing, whatever. We can come, with possible different explanations, right? Now, it doesn't mean we duck all these questions. Why did God, it's interesting. The Torah says there are 24 birds that are forbidden to eat, which means the rest of the birds should be kosher. So why doesn't the Torah tell me kosher birds? Why 24? What's the significance of 24? Now, someone could, we could come up with possible explanations. Torah doesn't tell me. Torah doesn't give me any information. So there are many, many questions. And some of them are going to have straight answers. Talk about sacrifices. Some sacrifices sprinkle the blood here, and you sprinkle the blood there, and some sacrifices you don't. So what's the reason? Okay, so we have to delve, into it. But the question of why God gives certain people character traits, right? It's the assumption of the question is we know what's going on inside of God's head. Why he did it like this and not like that. Some things maybe we can understand. Potentially we can understand. Even, if it's hard to understand. But, why did God give certain character traits? Don't know, right? I'll be the first to admit. we don't know. It could be something for the end of days, and you need people with these type of character traits to do certain things, with the people of other type of character traits in order for them to fight, and then whatever. Could be any number of reasons. We don't know ourselves. No person knows themselves, why they're given certain character traits, why they go through certain things. Could be we're here, many of us are here, not all of us, because we're a reincarnated soul. Our soul had a person died, soul went upstairs, got judged, God gave it the ability to come back, to fix up whatever it needed to fix. Do we know what we're here necessarily to fix up? No. Nobody has any idea. The soul is, we spoke about reincarnation. The soul doesn't know. In this world, the soul is not going to know what's going on, at least according to Kabbalah. What it's doing here. Now, people say, if you're put under deep hypnosis, you can speak about, past lives. And I asked a great Kabbalist this question, and he said, according to at least what Kabbalah says, that should not be possible. It should not be possible. In other words, when a person wakes up and snaps out of it, they're not going to remember. In this world, impossible to know why their soul came back and what the purpose, what they're here to fix up. All that being said, so we're all wired a certain way. Some of us, in my case, may be more wired than others, right? In different ways. Why? Either a person did it to themselves and they got wired a certain way, and that's now part of their nature. Or we said before, not that way. We all have basic character traits. Some have more of this, less of that, different things. And we're not in control of what anybody has. The soul God gives to each person, and he knows which soul he's giving to, and what person it's going to go to. God understands all these different things. So we don't have any control of who our parents are, who our siblings are, socioeconomic situation. We're not in control, right, of many of these things. That being the case, we don't have control over how we're wired. So that might not answer the question, or maybe it partially answers the question, right? But the Torah says these are the character traits of the descendants of Ishmael, right? Of Ishmael. If that's the case, why did God do it? Who knows? Could be, any number of reasons why God wanted these people to have these character traits. Why does Esav have the character trait of being murderers? Of living by the sword. You see Edom, Russia is Edom is also, part of that. So you see, bloodthirsty, murderous, see Stalin, kill 40 million of his own people, etc. So we see there are certain places, do certain things. Does that mean they can't overcome it? No. Now again, in the bigger scheme of things, we don't know. We don't know. It could be, it's a Kabbalistic idea. It could be, has to do with the end of days and bringing the Messiah. So you need these things to come together. But essentially, if a person doesn't know where their own strengths come from, you'll say, well, it's part of my nature. Great. Where'd your nature come from? God gave you the nature. Okay, but you're made up from, two parents, usually. Usually, keep this clean. So if that's true, they get the character traits, of their parents. And, whatever they did in their lives. So you might get some of them, you might get all of them, etc. But it doesn't mean a person has to act on them, right? So you can say, fine, that's by an individual. That I understand by an individual. We're not in control. We don't know, we're not in control of who our parents are and all this. God is in control of where the soul goes. So we can ask the same question. Why did God put this soul in this body? Why did God, let's say, put a soul in a body of a child that has progeria, right? It's an aging disease. And the child's like an 80-year-old in the body of a 10-year-old, right? Why did God do that? Right? The one possible answer is it can't be punishment because the child's not liable. There's got to be something else going on. So we understand that soul can be reincarnated into that messed up body in order to pay for whatever it did previously, right? But essentially, why people are rich, why they're poor, why we have upheavals, all these different things, we're not privy to that information. Nobody's privy to that information, unless God comes to them or, an angel comes to them and tells them, this is what you're doing here, this is what your purpose is, and all that. Other than that, we don't know. We don't know. But this is the claim the Muslims are going to make. This is exactly the claim. They're going to say we make them look bad, right? Because it says Ishmael is going to be a wild man. He's going to be a thief. This is what his nature is going to be. Yeah, Taka doesn't look so good. Esav could say the same thing. Pigs could say the same thing. What do you want from me? I'm half kosher, right? I only have one character trait. We have other fish that lose its scales, like king clip fish. When you take it out of the water, the scales you can't see, right? You have to scrape at the skin to see the scales. Whole question, whether that's kosher, or it's not kosher, whether you have to see the scales, or even if you scrape off and you see the scales, is that enough? That's obviously not the topic for now, but we could ask 1.5 million questions, because I like 1.5 million. We could ask 1.5 million questions. Why this? Why not that? Right? Why the other thing? Why some things we may have an answer for? Other things, God said it. We don't understand it. But when God, when the Torah tells me these people are going to have this character trait, or these people are known for this, they get really angry easily. So you can't argue with them, and you have to walk on eggshells when you deal with them, and you have to know how to talk to them. Why? Because that's who they are. That's their nature. Now we could ask the question: so why did God give them that nature? I know Tanakh Talk's very, a lot of people watching, more than 8,000 subscribers and all that. But do you think if I knew the answers, I'd be doing the show? I'd be famous, world famous over here. Even more famous than Tanakh Talk. Can't imagine, right? But it'd be more famous. We don't know. We have no idea. But God set it up in a certain way that, these nations are going to have these character traits, right? The Talmud talks about Persians. The Gemara says, it says, They eat like animals and they're hairy like bears. I don't know. You see, Persians, is that the case? They have certain character traits. Why they made that way? Why did God make them that way? It could be because of the nature where they live. Maybe they have thicker skin and it's colder there. I don't know. Could be any number of reasons, right? But what bothers people here? What bothers people and gets under their skin is the fact that makes Ishmael look bad. It makes them look bad because the Torah's now. This explains something else, by the way. While we're on this topic, right? It says it's going to be a wild ass of a man, right? Again, chapter 16, verse 12, and Genesis. Hand's going to be against everyone. Everyone's hands against him. Now, his hand's going to be against everyone. So I understood, that means essentially his hand is in everything, meaning he's got sticky fingers, right? So whatever he sees, he likes to take. But it doesn't just mean that. And the hand of everyone is in his. So what does that mean? His life is ownerless. He doesn't have his own life dependent on others. I mean, up until recent history, the Arabs, the Muslims, they're all nomads. They never had any power. That's why the Malbim, what the Malbim says in Zechariah chapter 14, until 100 years ago, it doesn't make any sense at all. They had no power. They had no state. They had nothing. They really had nothing. Now they have oil and power and all kinds of things. Okay. Right? But when we look at it, in those terms, it absolutely boggles the mind. Why? Because when we see what's going on, and we see how people act, we see how people act and say, oh, they all have sticky fingers. A lot of them do. Right? A lot of them, that's what the Torah is here telling me. But there's another aspect. The other aspect is, what does the Torah tell me? Torah says his hand's in the hands of everyone. Everyone's in the hands of his. Now, a simple explanation, I would say, means that his life is like ownerless. He doesn't really have a life. He takes other people's things. They take him. They use him for different things. So it's not like he has a life at all. His life is ownerless. Now, so what? Who cares? Right? As we'd say in Boston, who the heck cares? Right? What's the big deal? What's the big deal saying such a thing? What is it relevant to? It's relevant to the fact that, it's very hard to understand, even as, fanaticism, gets more fanatic and all that. People willing to give up their lives to kill Jews and to kill others. Right? Now, giving up their lives, okay, they have a guarantee, some sort of guarantee, that, if a guy does, he's going to get 70 virgins in the next world. Okay. But still, for a person to do such a thing, and so, what about his family? What about his kids? What about his parents? And all that. So you can tell me, look what happened, during World War II. You have the Japanese kamikaze, similar thing. They're willing to, kill themselves to kill others as well. But that's not normally a normal thing. People are going to do. Maybe someone's going to jump on a grenade and save the rest of his group and he'll die, but he's going to save everyone else. Okay. But to say I'm going to blow myself up or someone's going to blow themselves up, and kill themselves just so they can kill others, that's really not the norm, right? Most people, okay, if they're going to fight in a war, they don't necessarily want to, they're not going to go in 100% and say, okay, I'm willing to die and I'm going to die killing other people, right? Obviously, that's suicide. Now, that being said, how could you have, the fanatical Muslims willing to give up their lives in order to kill others? Right? Logically speaking, doesn't make sense. Maybe according, to the way they look at their religion, not everyone looks at it that way. Fine, you can say they're brainwashed, all this. But what does the Torah here tell me? The Torah here tells me something for all generations. Right? Torah here tells me that everyone's hands against him. His hands against everyone, everyone's hands against him, his body's ownerless. He himself is ownerless. If he himself is ownerless, doesn't that mean he might have more of affinity or a disposition to want to give up his life? Seemingly, I'm not going to say for no reason, right? Obviously, they believe it's a higher cause, to kill Jews, to kill other people, in order that they're not doing the right thing. So they're going to kill themselves in the process. Okay. But would I say that's normal according to nature? No. they can be brainwashed. You say, well, it's normal for them. First of all, not everyone's doing it. Maybe there are a lot of people lined up, they just haven't done it. Whatever the case is, I don't know. I've been talking from my elbow here. Don't necessarily know all the statistics out there. How many people are doing that, etc. But, we could say the Torah over here says if their life is ownerless, if their life is really ownerless, what does that mean? That means they could give up their life at the drop of a hat. They're going to say, you know why I'm doing it? Because I want to kill other Jews. I want to kill other infidels. But I'll give up my life in the process. That's not normal. But if the Torah says that's a disposition, that's part of, that's somewhere as part of their nature, that their life is ownerless. Now I can understand. Now that would make sense. Again, nature doesn't make sense. According to nature, it wouldn't make sense. But if that's how God wired them, and they're going to be a thorn in our side till the end of days, right? That's seemingly the case till the Messiah comes. Okay, but why would they do that? So you say they're fanatics. They're brainwashed. So they're doing, and they're getting money. Their families are getting money. So they'll die. They get all these virgins, and the family gets the money. Okay? It doesn't, either you're talking about fools that, don't know anything, or you're telling me that they're 100% getting brainwashed, which very well could be. But still, for someone to step up to the plate and do such a thing, and what it's going to cause, to the families and all that. So you can say they're all brainwashed. Very good. But what would get someone to do it? Brainwashing not enough. It needs, but you got to really believe in the cause. Fine. How many people are going to sign up? All right, it depends how much they're brainwashed. But if it's part of their nature, or some part of their nature, then it makes it easier to understand they could possibly do such a thing. Now, if you would have told me this years ago, I would have said, I have no idea. I have no idea, why they would do such a thing. It doesn't make sense. But we have precedents. You see what happened in World War II, right? You see what happened, these kamikaze Japanese, that killed themselves, killing others, as well. So we're going to say the same thing about them? I don't know. See where they come from, and whatever. But if this is really part of their nature, then I can understand. Then that makes sense. Obviously, not going to be so popular to say, but, fanaticism is only going to go so far. You have an elite group, you have a bunch of people, but things that spread like wildfire, and a lot of people are going to want to sign up, which totally goes against our own nature to do. Then we have to ask the question, we should ask the question, what's going on here? And the simple answer could be God's just using them as a thorn to you, and he's using them in this way. Could be. Right? Could be. But still, he has to push the buttons. God's the one that say, okay, I'm going to use this person as a stick, and this person's going to cause damage. This person's going to be liable, but, I'm going to use them as a messenger. So I'm going to use them to do this, that, and the other thing. Put the fear of God in Jews. And many years ago, you had all these people getting on buses, blowing buses up, blowing themselves up. People were scared to go on buses. And God forbid they could do this a dime a dozen. Easily. They could paralyze this entire country very easily. Very easily. Why don't they? It's easy to tell me they're not equipped. They don't have the brain power to do it, or God's stopping them. Because for a while, people were scared out of their minds. People didn't want to get on buses. Nothing. And then there were people attacking people on buses. So people said, I got my Louisville Slugger. Someone had a rolling pin. Someone had an iron they would walk on the bus with. How do you stop that? Something like that you can't stop. They could do it all over if they wanted to. All over. So the army's going to say, we're doing it. We're making all these checks and whatever. But we know God's the one in charge. God's protecting the Jewish people in Israel from all these other countries waiting to devour us. God forbid. So if we're going to say that, this goes against nature, and it has to come up for a reason that, they're all fanatics, they're all being brainwashed, they're all this, or, someone's not going to do something that really grates against everything they believe in. They have to believe in the cause. Right? They'll be brainwashed enough to believe in the cause. But what's going to cause them to do it? It's not just the cause. Right? There have to be other things going on. There has to be some level of affinity to such a thing. Or someone acts on them in a certain way. right? Someone, just using an example, again, we'll try and keep this clean. Someone, God forbid, is a pedophile. And every community, unfortunately, has pedophiles. Why is someone a pedophile? Most psychologists say because they've been acted upon themselves. They've been raped or abused themselves, usually. Not saying 100% across the board, but that's usually, that's usually the case. So now someone is acted upon in that way. What do they do by nature? Now, you need a lot of therapy to get over this, but really what could a person do? Because of what happened to them, it affects them to such an extent that even though they might be disgusted by it, whatever, they end up somehow doing it to someone else. Now, why is that? No, there are many potentially psychological reasons why that could be done. Again, people take what I say here with a grain of salt, but part of it could be now that's been done to them. I'm not going to say it's the norm and that's what they're looking for sure not, right? But now, it somewhat becomes part of them. They can't deal with it or whatever, and that's how it comes out. It comes out in that, in that negative way. So it could be the same thing. Same thing. They're brainwashed. They're, a lot of pressure, different things. But still, even with all that, is it going to get someone to pull the trigger? Are they going to be able to pull the trigger, pull the ball, whatever it is? Right? They still, it still has, I would say, again, my opinion for what it's worth, I would say it's got to be somewhere in their nature to do it. If it's not in their nature, you're going to say, well, it's either that or they're going to kill your family. It's either that or they're going to do this. So that could be part of it also. Right? They egg them on, finally convince them and money and this and that. Could be. Right? It could very well be. But there are a number of things, a person could do they never thought they had it inside of them to do, but it's part of it's somewhere in their nature. Whether God gave it to them, it came from other places. People have character traits they never thought they had, but that God brings out in different ways. But we could also say if we have a certain, we're made up a certain way and we don't work on it and it harnesses out of control, then we can't make any claims. We can't say, guess what? God, you made me this way. So after 120 years, God's going to say, why you do this? Why'd you do that? And the person understands what absolute truth is. But a person can ask the question, then what do you mean? We can ask the question, God, you made me this way. If you made me this way, then what did you expect? How did you expect I was not going to do this? God says, you're right, even if I did make you that way. So what? So you have this gene, you have that gene, you have the other gene. You can have a lazy gene. And God says, I don't care. You got to get up early. You got to pray. I got a stomach gene. Says, don't eat matzah or don't eat too much of it. And God says, I don't care. Shut up and eat the matzah. That's what you got to do. Regardless. And you're going to eat it on Passover and you're going to like it. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to savor it. Maybe. Right? Maybe not. But there are things we have to do, even if we don't, even if it goes, not according necessarily to our nature, what we want to do, what's best for us. Someone, let's say has some sort of addiction and they're embarrassed and they have to go to therapy and the last thing they want to do is let it get out that they went to therapy, other things. Today it's in vogue, it's more in vogue, people to go to therapy, other things, even so, there are things that grate against us that we don't want to do. That would go sort of against our nature, so to speak. But the reality is we have plenty of things in our nature that are good, that are bad. Some things we do to ourselves, we make it worse. Other things are done, God does it. God puts it as part of our psyche. It makes us who we are. We have free choice. Free choice might be limited. That might be, good topic for another time. Right? But the bottom line is God knows what he's doing here. God understands the nature of people and what nature to give to people. Now, why to give this nature to this one and that nature to someone else? Could be based on a million different factors. None of them we're privy to. Right? It could be based on what we have to go through in the future. It could be based on what our soul had to go through. Right? Now it has to go through this. It could be based on things we do to ourselves, but then it comes out in this way. Could be any number of reasons. But the question, the question, which is an interesting question, is the fact that, okay, if the descendants, God says this is what they're going to be, this is how they're going to act. If that's the case, so what if all the descendants get messed up? All the nations get messed up. So is there a recessive gene that goes throughout all the generations that's still going to have this character trait? Right? And the answer would be yes. It's still going to be there. It's not going to disappear. Maybe it's not as dominant. Maybe it's less dominant. Here in Israel, I'm not going to speak for other places. I can speak for here, and say what goes on. I've been here almost 28 years out of 30 years, something like that. So, that's what happens. I know someone, had their car stolen. By the time they got to the police, it says it's not even worth it. It's probably in some chop shop somewhere. And then the police, right? We're not talking necessarily religious Jews. They're saying that's the reality, right? That is the reality. Like, oh, that's negative. That's racist. You're saying terrible things. Again, where are the majority of things happening? Sorry, who's it happening by? Jews don't normally steal other Jews' stuff. It's not part of their nature. Can it be? A Jew could be a mafioso and could kill people, could kill other Jews and steal? Yes. It's possible. If they don't keep Torah mitzvahs, they go very far away. They're no different than non-Jews. That's very true. Is it plausible most Jews are going to do that? No. Why not? Because they're compassionate. They're compassionate for others, right? They do acts of loving kindness. They're not interested in fighting against others. They're not interested in stealing from others. Now, again, can those character traits go out the window because they don't keep Torah mitzvahs and they're far away? 100%. They can become dormant. They can get destroyed. And a person can act however they act. Right? No question. So, in this case, can the descendants of Ishmael fight against it? They could. Doesn't mean they have to act like that. It just means that, that's part of their nature. Or that's a good part of their nature. But every nation, has a certain nation, has a certain nature. I'll give another example for one I forgot to mention. You see Germany during World War II and how cruel they were. They fought against, women, children, not against armies, obviously. Rounded up the Jews, tortured them and all that. Many rabbinical authorities said there's no question they were part of Amalek. We don't know what Amalek is today, so we can't kill them, right? But there's a mitzvah to kill them. So the way we kill them and we destroy them is through what they believe in. And that's atheism, right? Things don't happen by chance. Right? We bring out to the world, the Jews bring out to the world, there's one God. There are a lot of reasons things happen. God's the one in charge. God's the one who, intervenes in history. So that's how we block out, Amalek today. Doesn't mean Amalek doesn't exist. The people themselves don't exist. Right? They themselves, we don't know who's who. Definitely don't know who's who. Right? But collectively with the German people, during the war, Yamach Shemam Zichram, and they rock wherever they are. Their names be blotted out. Look what they did. Look how cruel they were. That's Amalek. They fight on the weak. That's what they do. That's their nature. They don't believe in supernatural. With everything that the Jewish people, right? I'll just end with this. With everything the Jewish people went through at Mount Sinai, the Jews are on the highest level ever. No one wants to start up with them. Who starts up with them first? Amalek. If you're on a roll like that, you got God behind you, you got to be out of your cotton picking head in my language. What are you doing starting up with them? You got to be crazy. Start up with them. So the commentators give a parable. They give a parable of someone who jumps into a burning hot fire, right? Into a cauldron. So it's burning hot, right? 500,000 degrees. What's going to happen when they jump in? They're going to die. They're going to get burned to a crisp. But you know what? Even if they get burned to a crisp, the next guy is going to be a little bit warmer. Sorry, it's going to be a little bit cooler. He's going to cool it down. The other person jumps, he's always going to die. But eventually they're going to cool down the pot. Right? That's the mentality. It doesn't make sense. They're going to use hundreds of thousands of people of fodder to die before they bring that temperature down. Same thing. Jewish people are on such a roll. Don't worry. Okay, so we'll lose tens of thousands. We'll get to them eventually. We'll knock them up. Doesn't make any logical sense. Doesn't make any logical sense, but that's the parable, right? Nobody in their right mind is going to fight against someone on such a role. Nobody, right? Absolutely nobody. That's their mentality. They don't believe in anything supernatural. All the miracles they might have heard about, it was nature, it was high tide, Saturn was out of orbit while the miracles happened, such a idea. Whatever. They're going to make all kinds of excuses. And they're going to say God's out of the picture. Right? And that's what ended up killing Mr. Haman himself. Is God opens his eyes, he's pinned down by angels, and Achashverosh's bed is, and Achashverosh says, what, you're going to take my life in front of my face? And what's he going to say? I'm pinned down by angels? He's Amalek. He doesn't believe in angels. Killed by his own belief, right? Doesn't believe in supernatural. So they can explain it in different ways, but guess what? That's their nature. That's what the Torah says. That's their nature. Why did God make their nature so cruel like that? I don't know. But that's exactly what, that's exactly what the Torah says. And it makes them look bad also. It makes them look cruel. And we see, we see throughout history, that's who they are. And that's what they represent. Now, can a person break out of that? They could. It's going to take a lot of work to break out of that. No, you're not going to be so easy, right? But many rabbinical authorities, as we mentioned, said what happened in Germany, and how cruel, and what they did, and they were more, they were nicer to dogs than they were to humans, and all that without getting grotesque over here, and all the experiments Mengele Mashimo did, on people and all that. They're fighting against people who can't defend themselves. That's a major character trait of Amalek, right? So you say, well, we don't know who Amalek is. According to many, yeah, that's what they represent. Could there be individuals, part of Amalek, that are just as cruel and this and that? Yeah, we don't know who they are. We can't pinpoint and say that's Amalek, right? But they have a certain character trait also, right? And a person could say, come on, makes them look bad also. Makes Amalek look bad also. It does, right? But doesn't negate the fact, right, that you see throughout history, that's their nature. And that's who they are. And they're willing to fight. They're willing to fight a people on the biggest role of their lives that totally decimated Egypt. They don't care. They don't believe in supernatural. Yeah, so what are they going to do? That's their nature, right? That's who they are. They're going to get mixed up in the future. But some of them we can know. We possibly can know who they are based on their nature. So God gave different natures to different nations. Egypt also. They're also cruel nature, what they did. They went well beyond what they did. That's why God punished them so severely. Went well beyond. They also had a certain nature. Each nation has it. Question is, exactly what it is, and what it represents. And that's, we could go through, other nations, say, okay, what do they do here? What do they do here? What's their nature, etc. And God gave whatever nature he gave, to different nations for his own reason. And why did, just one last thing, why did God give that nature to the Egyptians? So he could take the Jews out to get the Torah. So they can understand what kingship really is. What it means to be in servitude. Because they're going to be in servitude to the king, and God says, you're going to be in servitude to me. And you're going to serve me, the King of Kings. But how are they going to learn how to serve a king in this world? God puts them in Egypt. But Egypt's guilty because they went well beyond what they should have done. And that is a wrap.
I was going to say, and that is the rest of the story.
And that, so we see by them, by others, as well, God, pulled the strings over here, but that's who they are, and that's what they represent. It's very hard to fix that. It's very hard to come out of that, but it doesn't mean it's impossible.
Very good. Well, alrighty then. Well, thank you so much for your time. As usual, guys, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on all notifications so you don't miss anything as it pops up. Rabbi, thank you for your dedication, and we'll see you next week, Hashem willing. Take care, everybody. Take care, Rabbi.